Welcome to the Father on Purpose podcast, featuring author and ministry leader Kent Evans and business executive and military veteran Lawson Brown. This is a show for you, Dad. You want to be a godly and intentional father. Unfortunately, you've turned to these two knuckleheads for help. Let us know how that works out for you. Before we begin, remember this: you are not a father on accident. So go be a father on purpose. Please welcome your hosts, Kent and Lawson.
Dad, have you ever succumbed to fear and it kept you from doing something? Have you ever been afraid of either the future or a challenge or a circumstance or an outcome? And therefore you decided, I better just sit this one out. If you've ever been tempted to let fear cause you not to step into a challenge, or it's made you to back away from something worth doing, we want to talk about that on today's show. And we want to talk about the antidote to fear, which is faith. Faith.
Wondered if you were going to get that out.
I was about to say something sarcastic, but I decided, no, let's just go keep the intro straight. Keep the intro straight. That's today's topic, and it's pulled from my most recent book called Don't Bench Yourself. It is one of the early chapters, and we're going to talk about that today. Before we dive in, we do want to remind you, if you were here last week, you heard us kind of kick this series off, and if you'd like a flyover of what we're about to do for the next 8 weeks, go backward one episode and listen to the first episode in this series about the new book, Don't Bench Yourself. After you're done today, feel free to hop on Amazon, snag a copy, or you can come to our website at manhoodjourney.org. We had a guy named Eric Lawson in Tennessee who recently ordered a dozen of the books all at once.
Way to go, Eric.
Now, we don't know if Eric's using them for kindling or to level off a table in his kitchen. We're not totally sure what he's going to be doing with all 12 of these books, but whatever. We've got Eric's money. We don't care what he does with the books. Eric, thank you for snagging a dozen. I'll bet you, I'm pretty sure if I remember right, Eric is either a men's pastor or he's the pastor at a church or he leads a group of some kind. And so he snagged a handful of these books for some people that he is working with. This book is for any believer, any Christian, any non-believer. I mean, we welcome someone who doesn't know Jesus yet to read this book. It cites a lot of Bible, so they may be a little turned off if they think it's a non-Christian book, but we would love for you to snag multiple copies, and we're selling them uber cheap on our website to make it easy for men's leaders and pastors or coaches, or if you lead a small group of any kind or a business, come snag a dozen or frankly, snag 1,200 dozen. We've got them in storage. We're ready for you. And by the way, Lawson, last week, you and I kicked this series off, and I just can't wait to get into the content. And I know we're going to talk about, the book itself, so to speak. But for the most part, man, I just want to focus on the content out of the book because it's the things that guys told us, and we're playing it back in the form of this book. We're going to talk about fear this week. It's a major topic. Some of it's known, like we know we're afraid of that thing. Sometimes we don't even quite know. It's operating in the background like a soundtrack of our lives. How do you want to get us started? What do you want to begin with this week as we talk about fear?
I applaud Eric. He bought 12. I only bought 3. I really wanted to see if it was any good before I get a whole lot of them to start handing out. No, it really is good. And I've gotten a lot out of it. I've gone through it a couple times now. It is thin and easy. It's also, you said maybe someone who's not a believer might run into a copy of it and be turned off. I think it would actually hit the mark because it's just very real. I mean, we all struggle with fear. I've got just a quick list here. You know what I mean? My lists. It can be something real, like a real fear. There's really a danger there. It could be unknown. It could be something that maybe it's not really real yet, but it's possible. And within the realm of possibility. And then there's other things that we're fearful of that are just not possible. They're not going to happen. But we still have this sense of fear sometimes. And then there is fear of things that we can't control. And like for me, kind of hit home, fear of failure. So things in our lives as guys, as dads, fear is all around us. And like you said, we operate not on fear, but on faith. I actually saw a woman I was in the Atlanta airport earlier today, and she was walking down the concourse with a t-shirt on that said faith, not fear. And I was like, wow, look at that. Getting ready to land and go and talk to Kent.
Did you walk up to girl, excuse me, ma'am, would you like a copy of Kent's new book?
Would you like to buy a book? I've got them on sale now, marked up 3 times. But 2 Timothy 1:7 says, God gave us a spirit not of fear, but of power and love and self-control. And so we got to tap into that. We got to remember that. We got to weld that on into our brain. But we're human. In fact, I want to hear your version of the story about when you were a teenager on the baseball team, and not just you, but everybody was scared of this guy, Steve Dixon. And while reading, I was like, Steve Dixon, that even sounds like a grown-up's name, but that's not a kid name. Yeah. So you went from facing him as the pitcher, going from just don't die.
Yeah, well,
you almost got good at it.
Well, so what's crazy about that story is I was not an amazing baseball player. No one would have said, oh, let's talk about Kent's baseball career. That would have been an insult to the word career. But I was a decent rec league player in summers. I'd bat in the high 200s. I was quick on my feet, and I'd get on base a lot. And normally you'd go to like the batting cage and practice certain speeds of pitches, right? So I remember this one batting cage in Louisville had 3 different speeds, and the highest speed you could hit on at this particular batting cage was about 72 or 73 miles an hour. And it was considered pretty fast. You stepped in and tried to hit a 72 mile an hour pitch, and you had to kind of be ready to swing the bat. Well, Dixon was 16 or 17 years old, and he was looking like he might go play D1 college ball. And he was a pitcher in a rec league, and he could get up to like the mid 80s, 83, 85 if he got lucky. Problem was, he didn't have a ton of control. So he would occasionally throw an 85 mile an hour pitch, and he would hit the backstop. Like, I'm not joking. That's not like me being hyperbolic. He would throw pitches so wild that the catcher didn't even put a glove on him.
Word up.
Yeah, it's like parabolic, but it's bigger.
I'm teasing.
So not only was the ball coming at you really fast, you didn't always have the assurance that it was not going to hit you in the side of the head. Like, it was a daunting prospect to bat against this guy. And I remember we played him in a summer league 2 or 3 times. I think it was 3 times. And the first time we played him, man, I was so scared. I genuinely, honestly, I just wanted to go up, strike out, and come back to the dugout. That's all I wanted to do is like, can I just make it back alive? Which I was successful at. If you want to call that success, I was really effective at striking out against Steve Dixon. But the second or third time, I was kind of like, all right, I'm seeing the ball. I'm going to try to swing. I swung once or twice. It still struck out, still went back to the dugout. I lived, but I swung. By the second or third game, I started, the tricks you do in baseball. You choke up on the bat. You open your stance, your front leg. You open it a little bit so you can swing faster. I was trying to catch up to the ball. And sure enough, man, the last time I batted against him, I can't remember if it was the 7th or 8th or 9th time, but I actually hit a ball that was put into fair territory, which was amazing, that I made contact. And bro, it's the closest I ever came in my rec league career to hitting a home run. The ball went straight to center field.
Awesome.
Way back. Dude caught it. It took one more step and hit the wall. Like, if I'd have hit it 4 more feet, I would have actually hit a home run off this guy. And I learned something that summer. Number one, when we got to step up to something bigger, faster, tougher, more challenging, fear is a very real and pretty natural temptation. Second, you can fail at something while you're actually getting better at it. You're closing the margin of error over time. Right. Even though it doesn't quite feel like you've succeeded, you're getting closer and closer and closer to success with each rep and each iteration. And number 3, you can do more than you think you can. I learned, wow, I can actually hit an 80-something mile an hour pitch. I kind of got to get lucky, and I didn't get on base, but still, I thought, man, that's a lot of progress in one summer.
Hmm. Yeah, what I got out of some of that was, you got to put yourself out there. You're not going to grow until you do. And there are times as dads where, all the time, really, you're in a situation you haven't been in before. I can't tell you how many times that something has come up with one of the girls where I'm like, I don't know what to do to help here. But you got to engage. We talked in the last week about staying engaged and about the temptation to disengage. Fear can lead us that way if we're not mindful. But you got to hold on to this strength that you are given, that we are granted, and put yourself out there, because that's how your faith is going to grow, by exercising that faith muscle. I also heard in that you keep trying, you keep coming back to bat. You totally swing, strike out, and you've messed something up in your family, but you get back up, and we talked about Derek Jeter. He didn't just, strike out and throw his hat down and take his uniform off and quit and walk off in the parking lot. He kept coming back. You fail actually more times than not. And so fear of failure and just being fearful in itself. I heard Zig Ziglar said, fear is an acrostic for false evidence appearing real.
Oh, wow.
And so you look at this situation and go, is this real? Is God with me? Are we going to tackle this? How is he going to get me through this? Because I bet it's going to seem bigger I bet it doesn't, it's not as big as it looks, is what I would say. And then the third thing I wrote down was recognize the small wins. Because striking out is going to happen repeatedly, the little thing that you've done to get better and to learn from something, I think you recognize that and go, okay, maybe I'm not the very best at fill in the blank, but I learned something. And
That's right.
I was able to handle a conversation with my kid that I was afraid of, that I didn't want to go do, but I did it. I got in there, and we're going to have more. We didn't solve it, but I got in there.
Man, I want to pivot towards some Bible comments real quick, but then I want you to bring us back. A lot of the listeners that we know, Lawson, are guys, dads, who are working a job. They're not just like, students or Bible pastors. That's not their main thing. And you've had to step into some bigger roles in the last 4 or 5 years as a business guy and take wider amounts of responsibility, both in terms of team size and budget. And so I'd like for you to talk to the business guy here in just a minute about what you've learned as a leader who's had to step into some bigger challenges from a business standpoint. Before we get there, I do want to talk about a couple things just to frame it up spiritually, right? Number one, there is basically one kind of healthy fear we see in Scripture, and it's the fear of God. So in Proverbs 9, it says, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, and knowledge of the Holy One is insight. So we see this idea that there is a positive fear, if you want to use that term. And sometimes teachers will try to go, well, it really means awe and reverence and respect. It's not fear like fear, but it's both. I mean, if you go look at how it's used in Scripture, you look at the word, you look at that Hebrew word or the Greek words used for fear, sometimes they're used interchangeably. So genuinely, there is a very healthy fear of God. Now, not in a, like he's unpredictable or he's irrational, or he is just mean, and he wants the worst for you, like you'd fear a burglar or you'd fear, someone who's trying to come and hurt you. That's not that kind of fear, but it is a healthy respect for God's power and his omniscience. And like Isaiah 55, his ways are above mine, his thoughts are above mine. There is a fear and a reverence and an awe that is very healthy. In fact, not just healthy, it's listed among the prerequisites for living a Christian life, right? The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. Or in Proverbs 14, it says, the fear of the Lord is a fountain of life, that one may turn away from the snares of death. So should I go do that sin? Should I go do that evil? Should I go steal that thing? I'm going to have a fear of the Lord, and it's going to turn me away. It's going to actually enable wise decision making. Or Proverbs 8 says the fear of the Lord is the hatred of evil. That somehow it's connected, that the way I'm going to hate evil is by having a good, healthy fear of God. So there is this very positive way in which fear is used in Scripture. However, the vast majority of the time we're told, don't be afraid, fear not, like Isaiah 41, right? Fear not, for I am with you. Do not be dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen you. I will help you. I will uphold you with my righteous right hand. So normally, I won't get in like the percentage game, but normally the vast majority of things that we are afraid of, embarrassment, the fear of man, the fear of not having enough food for tomorrow. Matthew 6, Jesus says, hey, don't worry about these things. By worrying, you can't add 1 inch to your life. You can't add one thing to your life. If you know I care about the birds, then you've got to know I care even more about you. And so most of what we're told in especially the New Testament is don't fear. Don't fear. You have this onboard Holy Spirit. And frankly, you have this outcome that in the end, if you fail completely and you lose it all and then you die, good news, you go to heaven. There's a end point to our life. Unless Jesus comes back, we're all going to die. And that for me is very liberating. For some people that may sound depressing or sad to think about that. It's quite liberating to say, hey man, in the eternal scheme of things, I'm not going to let this thing cause me to be afraid, whatever that thing is. But there are some things where when we're stepping up, like you did, into some bigger roles in a business context, or frankly, when we went from not doing a podcast years ago to doing a podcast, you're kind of putting yourself out there and you run the risk of people emailing you or disagreeing with you or me saying something stupid on air, for which my wife will tell me that Friday afternoon after she listens to the podcast episode. Now I've got one of my actual children helping us edit the show. So I've got like my own son listening to every word I say and sending me snarky text messages while I'm talking. So there are things that, you've got to step into, even though they might cause a little concern or you may be a little afraid of them. Talk to the business guy, Lawson, who has, similar to you, is either in or is about to be in or is challenged with growing into a new leadership capacity. You've done that really well.
Well, I've had a lot of help. I know that much. In the book, you write, you might not be ready for the bigger job, and this will only expose your insecurities or skill gaps. You feel professionally off balance. And dude, I can tell you that really hit the mark. I actually underlined it. So it's interesting that you're calling that out. And Isaiah 41 has actually been something that I have gone to, because there are so many times, it happened as recently as 2 days ago. I had to make a presentation for our strategic plan, 2024 through 2028. And got a lot of input from a lot of people. But there comes a time where the camera is on and you got to present for 30 minutes and it's a room full of people staring at you. And, that can be intimidating. It was intimidating. I was nervous. Before I clicked on, I bowed my head and was in my little hotel room all by myself and just said a prayer, to get me through it. And Isaiah 41 is true. It says, fear not, I'm with you. Don't be dismayed, for I am your God. It says, I will strengthen, I will help you. And I rest on that. And I love that. And I hold on to that. And I won't let go of him because of that, and it makes me think of how many times have any of us looked at something and thought, I am not ready. I'm excited. But in my heart, I may have even sold myself here. That I could do this, but I am in my heart trembling, because I don't think I don't know that I really am all the way ready. And to that I say, when are you ever all the way ready for something? I just don't think it exists. And I want to be like Caleb and Joshua, who were truly faithful to say that over there looks absolutely overwhelming, completely daunting. There's no way possible except with him. And so, sure, you know, and I'm not trying to compare, you know, a job that we have in some, you know, business setting to what Caleb and Joshua did, but it's the same principle of
Hey, Caleb and Joshua didn't have to do a strategery plan.
Right.
Yeah, I'm just saying.
Well, they kind of did that. They had to come back and report back to Moses, and everybody was looking at them.
Yeah.
And everybody disagreed with them.
That's right.
And they saw something that no one else did because they were looking through the lens that God prepared them for, equipped them with, and gave them to see how he sees and to know that he's with them. And so, so before, in fact, a couple of years ago, interviewed for a job, and it was with CEO, CFO, head of HR, you know, the whole thing, who are, by the way, great people, but very high standards, high expectations. A lot was on this job, and I knew that in reality, I was probably, you know, if I had to put a number on it, maybe 80% ready. And I was just as transparent as I thought I could be with them. You know, I trust them, and even said something to the effect of, you know, I don't want to put myself into a position that I know I'm not going to be able to handle. And so I've really thought about this, but I also know that God's going to open doors, and when those doors are clearly wide open, ready to be walked through, easy to walk through, and you have a sense that he's there and he's guiding you there, then listen to that. And if not, if the door is locked and it's got triple locks, and you're just banging on it and banging on it and banging on it,
right?
You know, like, stop. That's not for you. And so listen to that as well.
Hey, Dad, do you ever feel tempted to pull yourself out of the game of life and just warm the bench? To sit it out while your family steps in and picks up the slack? I know what it's like to want to ride the bench and withdraw. This can be the easy path to take, but we know it's not the best one. So, the engineers at Father on Purpose Laboratories have created a revolutionary new product, the Game Time Helmet. You put it on and it relentlessly screams in your ears, "Hey, pal, keep your head in the ball game." It comes in an array of colors and even has an adjustable chin strap to lock it on tight. I use one every day. I've even started letting my teenage kids wear it. It only has one volume setting, blaring. Now, we're joking. Sorry. This product doesn't really exist. However, what does exist is the new book, Don't Bench Yourself by Kent Evans. It's a short read packed with powerful lessons, and as a bonus, it does not incessantly yell at you. Snag a copy of Don't Bench Yourself and get back in the game today.
What's going on, dads? Check this out. Hey, in the world of fatherhood, balancing style and functionality is key, right? Range Leather gets it. Offering products like the sleek Elbert wallet and the American flag hat. It's perfect for dads on the move. Made from the finest Horween leather, Range's products don't just look good. They are built to accompany you through every dad duty with elegance and resilience. Snag your next dad essential at rangeleather.com and save 15% when you use code MJ15 at checkout. Head to rangeleather.com to get your swag. That's RANGE leather.com.
Of all the great movies that I think Harrison Ford has been in, I mean, what an actor, right? I think he's just had some really interesting roles, been in some movies I've really enjoyed. One movie, and I'm not a big sci-fi guy, like I'm not a big sci-fi movie, and I could barely watch The Lord of the Rings. It just was a little too fantastical for me.
Breaking news. Lord of the Rings is now sci-fi.
But he was in a movie years ago called Ender's Game. And I thought that was a really clever movie. And there's a moment in that movie that houses one of my favorite lines in a movie ever, in any movie ever, Harrison Ford is this general and he's training this young like prodigy to become the next like military general. It's a long story. And there's a lady who's part of the staff and she comes to Harrison Ford and she asks about this prodigy. Do you think he's ready? And Harrison Ford's line back was so great. He goes, you don't go when you're ready. You go when you're ready enough.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And he's
on.
ready enough. And I just thought, oh, what a line, man. It's such a good line. And I've always wanted to do that. I've wanted to go into the next thing that I was just ready enough for, right? I want to be on the edge of that.
Yeah.
And even as it says in the Caleb and Joshua story, in Numbers 14, God says about Caleb specifically, and I think we can fairly infer this is also about Joshua, but he basically says in Numbers 14, Caleb had a different spirit and has followed me fully. And
Right.
basically, by extension, what he was saying is, all you other people are a bunch of losers. No, I mean, it's overstated, but he's basically saying, these other people are operating out of fear, but Caleb and Joshua were operating out of faith. They saw the bigness of God and they saw the command of God and the opportunity of God as larger than the enemies that were real. These enemies were real, but God was bigger.
Yeah. Numbers 14, all the other people are saying, they literally said, if only we had died when they went to go look at Canaan. And then they asked, why us? Why are we being sent to go spy on this and see if, and then, but just previous to that was Caleb in Numbers 13:30, who was saying, we can do this.
That's right. Well, and the crazy thing is, like you and me, right? If a podcast doesn't go right, or if we forget to hit record, which we were joking about before, this isn't brain surgery, right? No one perishes because we get a podcast wrong. Where in Caleb and Joshua's case, well, we may take it out on Hunter or Alex, but in Caleb and Joshua's case, the Israelites wanted to stone them. Basically they were going, hey guys, we can do this. And they're going, hey, shut those mouths down. Like people got so mad at them. The cost of them operating in faith could have been their very own life. Yeah. And for most of us, the cost of operating in faith is not usually a life and death decision. Not usually. 99.9% of the faith-based decisions you're going to make will, if you don't get them right, they won't result in your death if you get them wrong. And that should give us courage as we lean into this.
Mm-hmm. And, they put their faith they put it into action, yes, but they put it where it mattered. And that was in God. What we hear in the world today is to have faith,
right?
But to have faith in yourself. Have faith in yourself. Have faith in our government. Have faith in other people that are going to do this, that you can rely on to do that. Thank goodness it's not my problem.
Yeah.
I've heard it seems like kind of a cultural saying nowadays that I've heard where people say, speak it into the universe. And you know what I'm talking about? Have you heard that?
I do.
They're like,
yes.
yeah, speak that into the universe. Versus what I think should be said is present your request to God. And so
that's right.
And so,
wow.
and if and when we do that, He hears us, He answers, and He's there, and He'll show us. He will show us why we can have faith and not fear.
Well, and what I like to call send all your emails to Lawson about this next point for a moment, while I just take a brief sidebar. What I find interesting about the speaking into the universe idea is there's a kernel of truth in it. And what I mean by that is words are powerful. God spoke the world into existence. He says Jesus was the Word made flesh. God says my word will never return void. And so what Satan does is he takes something that God creates almost always and just distorts it enough so as to be evil or unproductive, right? So the kernel of truth in that is our words do matter, right? Words matter. However, us speaking words into the universe, those don't matter. Like that's not, you're not going to get it's like the word inconceivable in the movie The Princess Bride. You keep using that word. I do not think it means what you think it means. So it's so important for us to understand, to your point, present your request to God. have faith in the Lord above. Don't just have faith in the universe. Don't just present your ideas to the internet. Instead, we got to know where they're going. And I think of this verse, 1 John 4:18 says, as we're trying to eradicate fear, and I want us to kind of land the plane today, Lawson, with some practical application for dads who are trying to help their children not operate from a position of fear. Because that, I think, is a razor's edge. It's a challenging place to be as a dad, because in some cases you do want to prepare your kids for things that could be real problems, right? I don't want to say to my children, well, let me do this verse and then I'll come back. I'll come back and get us kicked off on kind of the closing segment. The verse is this one, 1 John 4:18. There is no fear in love, but perfect love casts out fear. For fear has to do with punishment, and whoever fears has not been perfected in love. So as I read that verse, I'm reminded that if my children see me as this demanding taskmaster or an ogre or someone who's unpredictable or hateful, or I lash out in anger, I'm creating fear in their heart, in their mind, because it's uncertainty. Which kind of dad am I going to get today? Am I going to get happy dad, sad dad, angry dad? And so for me, I want to set a pattern, if I can, where I'm setting the table for my children to not be fearful individuals. And fortunately or unfortunately, depending on how you look at it, that kind of does begin with me. And if they are like, I've been around people like that. I'm sure some people have been around me and they're like that, where they think, okay, careful what you say.
Yeah.
Don't get them all riled up. I've had my own kids tell me, well, I didn't want to bring that up because I was afraid of what you were going to do. And I'm like, well, okay, I kind of got to own that.
Right.
But at the end of the day, man, I want to try to set the example in my home where perfect love casts out fear. Now, I know I can't do it perfectly. I know that word scares people, but I want to get to the place where my wife and my children know so well that I love them, that there's very little room for fear to dominate in our home. And I know a lot of dads tell us that they feel like they don't know how to communicate with their kids, as an example. And sometimes that's because we've set this pattern up of, I tell you what to do, you do it wrong, I tell you you're wrong, and I'm the corrector from on high. And you kind of got to, you can't let your 4-year-old run out in traffic. You can't let your 12-year-old not do his homework. Like, there's things you need to do that are, structural or rule-based. But man, we got to do them in love. We've got to do them in love so that our children don't get the wrong idea about God the Father.
Mm-hmm. That's so true. There's a balance, I think, between creating fear and having respect as a dad. Having your children respect you is very different than them being fearful. If when you enter the room or you move quick and they flinch, that's fear. That's not good. That's awful. That's not healthy. I think about our guest that we had on the show a while back, Orv. I bet there were plenty of people in his life where when they came near him, he was very fearful. And, there were times when obviously all of us dads, like me, I would raise my voice at the girls when they were younger, when they did something. But it wasn't a spirit of meanness, not trying to make them afraid of me. It was more like to break the moment or to get attention. In fact, one of those times saved Abigail's little 3-year-old life because I yelled stop at her so loud that she literally came to an abrupt stop before she walked out into the road.
Wow. Yeah.
And so respect versus fear as a dad to reflect our Heavenly Father.
Yeah.
He is the only one who can can bring with it perfect love that casts out fear. We can't. We don't have the ability to do perfect love. But this element of like being very clear and correcting a child and saying, you do not talk to your mother like that, right. Or you do not lie about what just happened with your sister. That's different. Being clear and setting guidelines from a disciplinary standpoint. Yeah. That's a different level we're not talking, that's not fear.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Oh man, for sure. Well, I look at it through the lens of, I'm trying to set this example, like Paul said, right? Follow me as I follow Christ. And so that's my mission. That's my objective. And so I'll give you a good example. Jesus said in John 6:38, I came not to do my own will, but to do the will of my Father who sent me. Okay, so Dad, let's say you're at dinner and your kids are sitting there and they're old enough to understand, a relatively mature conversation. And you're talking about a job opportunity, or you're talking about, I don't know, an investment you might take, or you're talking about maybe moving to a different city. And those things are coming up. And then you're salting that conversation at your dinner table with your children by saying, hey, I don't want this just to be our decision. What do you guys think the Lord would have us do? And so you're taking that idea, same idea that Jesus said more than once, and that was that he wasn't trying to do his own thing. He's trying to do what God said. When you can weave that into that conversation with your kids, then you're not parenting from a position of like command and control. You're showing that you too are in submission to a greater authority, right? Because a lot of times your kids will feel like, hey man, you and mom get to come down on us. Who comes down on you? And you go, oh, well, let me show you how that works. Number one, your mom comes down on me, when she, in private, she tells me where I get off base, but I'm accountable to God. I'm accountable directly to God for how I parent my kids. And for that, I have a tremendous amount of respect and awe and care, and I want to do it well. Not perfectly. I'm not under some illusion, but I want to do it well. So dads, as you're thinking about some ways you can transfer this non-fear-based mentality, this faith-centric mentality, let's talk about a few of those real fast. Number one, we talked about it a moment ago. Be reliable and be predictable. If you're on time, if you do what you say you're going to do, that kind of thing creates a base of trust. And they know I can rely on what dad says. Therefore, I don't got to be afraid about my dad not coming through. Now, there are exceptions and you may get a flat tire. Things happen. But generally, set a pattern of being reliable. You'll find that it removes a lot of fear in the hearts and minds of your children. Secondly, be honest. Be straightforward. For example, when I was going from a day job that I used to have to doing Manhood Journey, I had to tell each of my kids, hey man, we're definitely going to take a bit of an income hit here, and that might affect you in some small ways. Like instead of you having private music lessons, you might have to go learn those on YouTube or whatever, right? There may be financial cutbacks that we have to kind of step through as a family, and y'all need to know you're part of this decision. Or when we went to adopt, we had to let our older boys know, hey, we're going to be bringing a younger boy into the family who may come in with some dynamics that make it a little harder for us as a family. Are you guys all on board? So honestly assessing where you're going will remove fear, even if the future is a bit uncertain or dicey, because your kids will learn they can trust you through the process.
Yeah, right on.
And that'll still remove fear from their heart.
Yeah, and one quick note on being honest too is when we make mistakes and are honest with them about something we've done, we have not handled correctly with them, that demonstrates and that gives a clear example of we're all going to make mistakes. You got to own up to them. You got to admit it. You got to face it. And here's how to do it. In fact, I'm doing it right now with you to let you know, like this is how to handle when you mess up.
Oh man, ain't that the truth? And then the last thing I would say, man, and we could go on forever about this, but I would say one other kind of big bucket of opportunity you have as a dad is both taking risks that are calculated in the present. So like, stepping up to the plate for that 85 mile an hour pitch and letting your family know when you are, and also looking back over when God had delivered you. So you think about the stories that Israelites could pass down from one generation to the next, from the 10 plagues or the Red Sea or Caleb and Joshua eventually entering into the promised land. Those kinds of generational stories of God coming through are things we owe it to our children and our grandchildren to tell them about. So I will occasionally tell my kids stories about times when I either almost was killed or times when things looked pretty bleak from an economic standpoint, but God delivered us, or I had a relationship that broke down and God restored it, etc. I try to pass on some of those stories to my children so they can know they don't need to be afraid.
Right.
Because, the best predictor of God's future deliverance is his past faithfulness, right? And you just got to look backward sometimes and go, hey, man, God's been there for us, hadn't he? And we owe it to our families to be the lead storyteller.
Yeah. I love that. Evidence from historical. What'd you say? That's worth writing down. Whatever you said was.
Just hit rewind. I have no idea what I just said. I'm making this up as I go along.
What God has done in your past helps build your faith for the future, is the paraphrase.
Close enough.
Yeah. But, like a lot of things in life, communication helps with all this. So talk about it often with your kids. Talk about when we're afraid of something. Talk about when fears is creeping in, and help them see that it's their dad wrestles with things just like everybody does. And how can God help us overcome and have that spirit of faith, not fear?
And I'm going to give the last word on today's show to a customer of ours who came through our website. His name is Jerome. And the reason I'm going to mention Jerome is because I want you, Dad, to know, after listening to today's show, you are not alone. So here's what Jerome said are some of his goals and his challenges. Jerome said he wants to cultivate and leave a godly spiritual legacy for his children. He wants to spend quality time with each of them, and he wants to connect with them wherever they are in life. Man, that sounds like something that we've heard thousands of dads say to us over the years. I have those same desires and challenges. And let me tell you what one of his challenges was. Jerome said this to us in an email. The biggest challenge for him is time. He's struggling to find the time to connect in meaningful ways. Dad, you also may struggle to find time to connect with your kids in meaningful ways. I have had the same challenge. We've all had that same challenge. There's only 24 hours in the day, so go make the most of them. We hope that we've made a good use of the last 30 minutes of your life and not wasted your time. And we will see you next week for the second big challenge that we have in terms of not benching ourselves, and that's going to be to tackle the enemy called shame. Hey, Dad, thank you for listening to today's show. If you found this episode helpful, remember, you can get all the content and show notes at manhoodjourney.org/podcast. And if you really liked it, please consider doing 3 things. Number 1, share this podcast with someone. You can hit the share button in your app, wherever you listen to podcasts, or just call a person up and tell them to listen in.
We're sorry, your call cannot be completed as dialed.
Number 2, subscribe to this podcast so you get episodes automatically. That helps us as well to help dads find the show. You can do that through your favorite listening app, whatever that is. And finally, review this podcast. Leave us a review, good or bad, wherever you listen. Those reviews also help other dads find the show. You can always learn more about what we're up to at manhoodjourney.org or fatheronpurpose.org. We will see you next week.
Yeah.
I'm backtracking on the whole idea now. I'm gonna pull that idea back off the table.
Yeah.